welcome, Matt. So Matt Follows is kindly joining us on the Filmmakers Podcast with myself and Conor. And we do a quick roundup of what you've got as your micro intro on your website, so people have an idea about what you do.
Okay, dokes.
Hi, I'm Matt. Since 2012, I've been a peak performance psychologist and coach for some of the biggest names in the creative and entertainment industry. The results I get are deep and profound, unbreakable, under pressure, and bullshit-free, which is why some people call me the subconscious bullshit eliminator, but most just call me Matt. So welcome, Matt, and
hello.
It's a pleasure to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Conor's been working with you for quite some time. From what I gather, he's had amazing results already, and he does plug you quite regularly to me as a as a beneficial.
I'm doing your work out there for you, Matt. I'm out plugging you.
Thanks, mate.
But I think the reason, Conor will speak to this himself, but I think the reason why we're interested as a filmmaking podcast to sort of delve into this stuff is because filmmakers, especially since COVID and the writers' strikes and the actors' strikes, have had an incredibly difficult time, sort of psychologically, mentally. There's been a lot of people out of work. There's been a lot of people struggling to sort of get the career that they've envisioned off the ground. And part of that is because of very difficult climate that's been going on in the film industry. And I think part of it, especially sort of ties into what you do, which is people with limiting beliefs, or maybe the wrong approach, or maybe just how they see themselves, or subconsciously how they're making decisions is not getting them as far as they'd like. So, your background also is the entertainment industry. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got started, what led you into this path, and maybe a bit more in depth about what you do?
Yeah, thank you. So I started out in advertising initially as a writer, and back in 1995, I think it was. Back in the dark ages. Wow. And I started at a little place. It was a startup at the time, startup little business called M&C Saatchi. And it was a place that Morris and Charles had literally just been, for whatever reason, had left Saatchi and Saatchi, the agency they founded, and decided to find another agency to see if they could do it again and beat their primary agency, their first agency. So I joined that very, very young, and it was an amazing time. I had a brilliant time there. I was there for about 4 years, I think. So it went from a startup to an incredibly successful, I think it was the fastest growing agency in the world at the time. So it did really, really well. And we worked on British Airways, Foster's, Silk Cut, Benson and Hedges. So all of the kind of like really holistic brands. We were on those, doing all the healthy stuff, which kind of paved the way for a lot of my life after that. Alcohol and cigarettes. So we did that for funny cigarettes. So we did that for a few years, won some awards and things. And then we got headhunted to another agency, another startup called Wieden and Kennedy that we never heard of, but it was the agency that actually had Nike. So we'd heard of Nike, obviously. We were like, well, we'll come over. And they went, excellent. You have to take a massive pay cut, which looking back in hindsight wasn't a massive pay cut because I think we're only on 40 grand anyway. So it was not that big a pay cut, but it meant we had to stay in Tottenham and stuff for a little longer. So we did that, worked on Nike, then we worked on Honda, and it was a time when all the kind of like really kind of famous Honda work was done, all the Honda Cog and Love Something, Hate Something, all the great stuff was being done at that time. Some amazing people. And it was there that I learned the dark side of creativity, because up until that point, I was obviously young and I pushed myself to the brink of exhaustion and could survive it. And it was kind of not that hard. But after like close to a decade of doing that, no holidays, didn't take weekends off, lived around the corner from the agency, so was always in the agency. I had a spectacular burnout, and it was actually in the middle of a Diet Coke film shoot. Collapsed. Yeah, it was crazy time. Collapsed. Anaphylactic shock.
Oh, wow.
Was rushed to hospital, which is luckily around the corner. Put straight into the...
That's why we have them on the call sheets, the old hospital nearby.
It does
happen.
It's because of Matt.
Oh, thanks, Matt.
Exactly.
Wow.
So it's
anaphylactic shock. I mean, that's quite a reaction.
Yeah, you kind of blow up to the size of Mars kind of thing, and it looks kind of scary. It feels kind of scary as well because you can't really breathe and things. But that happened, and that was on a Friday afternoon, and I didn't learn my lesson, so I didn't go to the agency on Saturday, but I did go on Sunday. And I didn't go on Saturday because I had to move flats. So I kind of went back in, and I think it was a second burnout that made me think, I don't think I want to do this. So I left advertising, became a director for a little while, commercials director, and I still didn't feel right, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went into therapy, try and fix my broken brain, as I kind of felt it was. That wasn't working, didn't work, nothing was touching it. So I started learning. Well, I went to a weekend course in NLP, probably back in 2000 or something like that, a long time ago. And it was neurolinguistic programming, the things that Tony Robbins kind of made famous and stuff. So I did that, did a weekend of that. Then I became a practitioner, then a master practitioner and trainer. Then I thought, this is amazing. I'm kind of don't have to be in creativity anymore. I can kind of shun creativity because I blame creativity for all my pain. So I thought, well, I'll just be a therapist. And I did that. Then I went to King's College, retrained as a clinical psychotherapist, clinical hypnotherapist, left there, became a trauma therapist in Harley Street for 4 years, only working with doctors, lawyers and bankers and stuff, no creative people. And I thought I was enjoying it until I woke up one day and thought, I really miss creative people. I miss their mind. I miss the creative brain. I miss the madness and the fun and all of that kind of stuff. So I left that. One of my friends at the time was now running a big agency, and he said, look, could you coach me? And I was like, well, I'm a therapist. He goes, yeah, I know, but I can't get therapy through the accountants. But coaching I can. Will you be my coach? And it started then. So that was about 2011, 2012, I think it was, when it kind of like first had that first client. And from then on, I've just been coaching creative leaders, CEOs, those kind of people who work in the creative industry, the entertainment industry, marketing and PR and stuff.
Fantastic.
Been fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we maybe we can start on the sort of exhaustion side of things, because that's a good one. Funnily enough, I did a Diet Coke advert, and I was working in production, and then also they needed someone to be like a stunt swimmer, because basically it was in this sort of open lake, and everyone was getting exhausted. The body double had already done it a few times. They're like, we need to keep him, off the lake so he can do the body double stuff. And then the lifeguard didn't want to do it again after they did like 3 or 4, because it's quite exhausting doing like a sort of run, and then you had to climb up onto the pontoon. And so I did it, and then the first day I'd had like 5 hours sleep because I was doing the other job, and I was pretty exhausted by the end of it. I was but I sort of recovered quite well. Then I had a second night of about 5 hours sleep, and production comes along, could you do it again? I was like, all right, okay, yeah, whatever, I'll jump in. And the second time I was just sort of collapsed on the floor for about 20 minutes afterwards, and the medic was sort of coming over. It wasn't anything like remotely serious, but I was absolutely shattered. And it's just sort of, that whole situation is so commonplace. I mean, obviously I did something optional that was completely my own choosing, which so it's my own fault in a way. But the lack of sleep and let's just work. And it doesn't matter if we have any rest. I've always found that like really counterintuitive. And I see so many people in the industry that they think the first thing that should go is sleep. And then they end up in this burnout sort of situation where they're not able to think, they're extremely stressed. So, I mean, that's, what's your sort of thoughts on that whole process of the burnout side?
So yeah, burnout. It's dangerous, but so can the journey to it, especially as a creative person. So the problem with burnout, or the thing that leads up to burnout, is the cortisol that gets released in the bloodstream, the nervous system. So you've got adrenaline, which is the first stress hormone, which obviously a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people know about, and the damages that can do. But it's actually the cortisol, which is the one that's most concerning. So we need a certain amount of cortisol, obviously, in the morning to get out of bed, to get us to do things. We need to kind of have cortisol to get us out of the way of a speeding car if it comes in front of us and stuff, so we can be motivated to action. The problem happens is when we get too much cortisol for too great a period of time, because what it actually does, cortisol actually overstimulates brain cells to death. Wow. So because we've got cortisol receptors in every nerve and fiber of our mind and body, there's not a square millimeter that doesn't get attached to, and it's corrosive. So if it hits your brain and it's in there for a long period of time, there's a part of the brain called the hippocampus, which actually starts shrinking with a lot of cortisol. And that's when we start getting memory loss and memory fogging. We start losing our curiosity. We start being more fragile, less resilient. And also what happens if we don't have access to that as much as we'd like to, it actually, because the hippocampus is responsible for laying down and recalling memory and long-term memory, we need our memories in order to be creative, because we bring up old memories, we collide them to make something new, interesting and different in a different way. Now, if we can't access those memories, or we can't access those memories at speed, we start losing our ability to think at speed. And we need to be able to think and be creative at speed. And we need to be courageous. We need to be curious. So if that happens, it's a bit of a problem. But also another part of the brain called the amygdala, which is like the kind of Department of Homeland Security, essentially, that's in the limbic system, that gets stronger. So the more we work it, the more that the cortisol comes, it triggers off fight or flight, your amygdala becomes stronger. And then you're in a permanent state of red alert. And that's when people start feeling paranoid about everything and everyone. They start thinking everyone's out to get them. They start thinking that they're not good enough. They're not worthy. The work they've been doing is just shit. So all of these kind of things. And it's a lot of it is tied to cortisol. It all can be reversed. You can reverse all of the stuff because of neuroplasticity and neurogenesis and stuff. But it's something to be mindful of, because I didn't know about it and I wasn't. And my creativity was suffering. My memory was suffering. I was physically suffering, and I was psychologically weak, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I first came across Matt, I was I think we always have this assumption that you have to be at that absolute bottom point, rock bottom, like you were, Matt, where you're completely physically and mentally burnt out. For me, I wasn't quite at that point, but I'd certainly started to notice some changes. Maybe I was slightly more negative, becoming slightly more jaded about the industry. But for me, what I was trying to get to was a point of elevating my mindset.
Yeah.
Because we're in such a competitive industry. It's like an athlete, Matt. You talk about this a lot. It's like athletes don't just work on their body. They don't just run the physical drills. A big part of it, especially nowadays, is the mentality. And I felt like my mentality was okay, but it had been eroded over time, and I wanted to really get to that peak state. So I think it's always a case of trying to balance this, looking out for yourself in the best way you can, but also taking your performance to that next level. And that's a big part of what you specialize in, right, Matt?
Yeah, and I call it sustainable high performance. So you've got high performance, which is like non-sustainable high performance, which is kind of like not following what science is.
Red Bull based high performance.
Yeah. Slamming the coffees.
100%, that type of high performance. And that's kind of short-lived. And you can do it for a certain amount of years, but then it kind of will catch up on you. Then you got sustainable high performance, which is you're not driven by fear, you're driven by flow. And that's where we want to get to. When you're feeling your best, you're performing your best, and you're showing up as your best more often than not. So it's not about, as Conor rightly said, it's not about being broken in order to become pressure-proofed. It's about becoming pressure-proof before you get anywhere near to being broken. And then you make sure that with the pressures that we have in the world and the industry right now, they kind of bounce off you. They don't kind of affect you as deeply, which is really important if you want to stay competitive and stay happy, essentially.
So you specialize in the creative industry. There's other people that do maybe something slightly similar to what you do, but you've really honed in on the creative industry. So what are some things and some common patterns that you're seeing amongst creatives, things that they're struggling with? Because I know from my side, when I sit down with creatives at the moment, for me, mostly filmmakers, screenwriters, actors, there's a bit of a heaviness. There's like an anxiety and a burden, like they're carrying this weight around for understandable reasons. But I just wanted to understand from your side, what are these common patterns you're seeing amongst those of us in the creative industry?
Yeah. Good question. So basically, there's three types of crises that I see that are most prominent at the moment: a crisis of focus, a crisis of faith, and a crisis of identity. So essentially what happens is that people aren't able to focus on what it is they really, really want. They know what they don't want, they know what they want less of, but it's very hard to know what specifically they want and in what format they want that to come in, and in who they need to be in order to have that thing. And because of like many things, but tech and all of this kind of stuff, our focus is being fractured all of the time. It's being competed for by different bodies, essentially. And it's no secret, our memory now is less than a goldfish. It's under 8 seconds. our focus, which is not memory, our focus, which is not great. And if you need to focus to get into flow states, like flow follows focus. So the less able you are to focus, the less able you are to get into a flow state. So then you probably default to a fear state, to be driven away from the thing that you're scared of, rather than towards the thing that would give you your freedom. Focus of faith is that even if someone does know what they want, they've lost hope and optimism and belief that they can actually make it a reality, they can make it happen. It's a really big thing. So, and that's a really, really frustrating thing. If you know where it is you want to be going, you know the kind of target you want to hit, but you don't believe, you don't have the self-trust, the confidence, the courage, all of that kind of stuff, the certainty you'll reach it, you have a lack of faith. That's a real big problem that people are struggling with. And finally, the crisis of identity, because of the things we've been through over the past few years and stuff, and because of the amount of stress, the amount of fear that's been going around, spread through the media, a large part as well, let's be honest, it's collapsing people's sense of identity. They no longer know who they are. And if you get into a state of like, when you're kind of like really high performing, but in a fear-based performance level, you may even get to where you want to get to, but you've left yourself behind. You don't recognize yourself anymore. And that's another thing that a lot of people are getting to, especially at a high level. It's like, well, I'm here, I've achieved it, but somewhere along the line, I got lost. Where am I in all of this? So it's those kind of three things that are kind of colliding a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of, the third one is an interesting one, and I suppose you could interpret that on how the recognizing it's like, what lengths are you going to go to at personal cost to get where you want to go, and I mean that's sort of one of my things is I sort of feel like there is a way to treat people well whilst still being extremely persuasive and pushing and being fairly annoying and persistent. But I mean, I feel like the second two are sort of, I mean, the first one, we talked about, I mean, that's like, to me is like, the addictions that we're in with like phone addiction, like that's a big thing at the moment. Like I sort of struggle with, I think loads of people, throughout the world are really struggling with just looking at their phones too much. And that does take away that focus. And then you sort of end up in this, this sort of, everything's about dopamine, isn't it? It's like, I'll have a coffee. Okay, I'll have another coffee. And then you get a bit more stressed, but you're also a bit more buzzed. But then maybe you're too buzzed to actually do the thing you're supposed to be doing. So you're just jumping back onto your phone. I mean, do you have any sort of thoughts or tips around that, especially like in terms of keeping that actual focus to get what you need to do done?
Yeah, so one of the like practical things I've done with my phone is the first thing is turn it to grayscale, the actual screen. Yeah, it's not as attractive to kind of look at. Another one is to make sure all of the apps that kind of steal your focus are a load of screens down. So you have to actually scroll through loads of screens. So have one app per screen kind of thing. So it's an actual nightmare to get to that thing. So that kind of like puts a blocker on it. One of the big things with the dopamine is that dopamine is the pursuit hormone. So essentially, when we are pursuing something, we get a dopamine hit because it's the thrill of the chase. The problem with dopamine is it doesn't care if that thing's dangerous or healthy for you. All it wants is a dopamine hit. And if the more dopamine you get in the system, the less serotonin you get in the system. Now, serotonin is, if you have a lack of serotonin, you don't feel safe in the world. You don't feel safe within your own skin. So you want to have more serotonin in order to feel anti-fragile. And the way you want to get more serotonin into the system, so say you shut down the dopamine hits, cheap dopamine hits, so make your phone less attractive essentially, then what you want to do to increase serotonin is start deciding who are you at your optimal best. So think about who am I at my absolute best in energy, who am I at my absolute best in work, who am I at my absolute best in love? And then you actually start closing a gap between who you currently are and who you are at your very best. You start doing things that close the gap. By doing things today that serve your future self, your nervous system releases serotonin. That's the reward you get by serving your future self, not your current self, which is dopamine. When you start serving your future self, that's the serotonin release.
So when you say sort of serving your future self, because I mean, I had an interesting one. I'd had like a long period of like bad work, and I was feeling like pretty like I had number two, which was the lack of hope. Like everything sort of seemed to be going wrong in the career at the time. I had zero money. And I became a little bit insular sort of over the winter months. And I remember there was a sort of moment just with some basic like socializing where I was in a sort of a big group of people, and they're people I sort of knew before. And there was a part of me that's like, I don't really want to go and speak to them. That actually feels like quite a big ordeal, which isn't usually the case. I'm usually sort of, I don't love networking, but I'm always, happy to go out and do something. And just by doing the act of jumping out of that sort of comfort zone, I immediately felt like my whole psychology shift after I had done that thing. And then suddenly like the way that I interacted with like everyone completely changed from then onwards. And I think it sort of happened again. And I feel like every time I do something where I really jump out of comfort zone, that sort of, I don't know, how my mind sort of perceives things and the thoughts and the decisions all seem to shift. I mean, is that kind of in the territory that you're talking about in terms of future self? Do you mean like jumping out of like who you sort of currently are and who you're happy to be into someone that's, making different decisions and actions that are outside of their normal remit?
Absolutely. But I mean, you said a key part in there, which is that a part of me didn't want to go there. I mean, a part of you is that because we've all got different parts of us, and parts of us are sometimes conflicting with other parts. That's where we get a lot of frustration and overwhelm and doubt and all that kind of stuff. We have a psychological parts in conflict. So there's a part of you that didn't want to, but there's a part of you that did want to. And that may have been some of the tension and frustration you felt. It's like, you're capable of so much more. You're capable of doing the things you wish to do, but there's a part of you that worries and doubts it and wants to keep you safe. Now, if you just serve the one that wants to keep you safe, that's cool. You may stay safe for a while, but you're going to sacrifice what your true potential is in the long game. So by jumping out of that and jumping into the future and kind of thinking, actually, I'm going to do something that I'll be proud of myself at some point is a really, really big thing. And it's kind of like one of my clients once said that they think the secret to life is reaching the fuck it point as fast as possible. And that's their secret to success. And the fuck it point is essentially when, we've all been there when you're stalling, you get yourself so annoyed with yourself, just go, fuck it, I'm just going to go and do it. Then when you do that, you kind of get this huge weight lifts off your shoulders. And whether it's successful or not is not as important as you actually took action. And at the end of the day, one of the quotes I really love is that fear can't catch a moving target. So if you keep in motion, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like you'll move away from the thing you fear and you move into the thing that will give you the freedom, which is your future self. So yeah, big advice to everyone is get to the fuck it point as fast as possible.
I love that.
Basically amplify. Go ahead, Conor.
No, yeah, I love that, Matt. When you first said that to me on the weekly check-ins, I was like, it's so simple, but it's just so effective. And sometimes that's just what you need. It's like someone just to give you those little impetuses, the little diving board to just set you off on your journey, because it can become so isolating when you're in your own head. And someone like you, Matt, from my experience, because we work in a group session, I see you working with lots of different people. Everyone's a creative. Everyone's got different problems, but they're all kind of similar. Everyone's going through the same stuff. And you help people to identify what's holding them back specifically. And a lot of the time it comes down to, I think you called it cognitive dissonance, where you've got these two internal beliefs. It's like you want to make a film, but you also really want safety. And maybe there's a clash there in these two things that you have in your head, and you're not always aware of that. So maybe you could speak a little bit about cognitive dissonance and these conflicts we have in our own minds.
Yeah, so that's when I call subconscious bullshit. So subconscious bullshit, I sometimes think of as subconscious saboteurs. And essentially anything that's outside of your conscious awareness that is hurting you, harming you, or could stop you from doing the thing you should be doing. So that's what I specialize in helping people release, get rid of, eliminate and stuff. Now, Carl Jung said an amazing thing. So Carl Jung, the founder of Jungian psychology, said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will dictate the course of your life and you shall call it fate. So what we want to be doing is we want to make the unconscious conflict conscious. When it becomes conscious and we get that kind of like, we're able to see it in front of us, sometimes that collapses the conflict straight away there and then, because it's like, wow, these two things don't fit together, they don't work. But when they've been unconscious, they've been driving your behavior all of the time. So what we want to do and what we do in the groups, what I do in one-on-ones and all this kind of stuff is identify what is that subconscious bullshit, what are those saboteurs that are lurking in the background, and kind of like little tiny terrorists running around their brain and stuff, and just find out, draw them out, smoke them out, and then eliminate them so that they are no longer the things that are silently sabotaging you, essentially.
I mean, I feel like that's the main one. I feel like between people that are semi-successful and really successful. And it does sort of baffle me a little bit, because I mean, there's definitely some things that, you know, from my side, I'm aware that I have limits that I'm aware of, and I'm still not getting past them. And there's also this kind of, I find the sort of the frustrating and scary bit is the stuff that you're kind of aware it's there, but you don't exactly know how to get past it. You know, like okay, I can do this job. You know, there's a part of me that is like very, very keen, is 100% confident that if they were thrown in the highest, you know, level of, you know, film challenge, I would, you know, be absolutely fine. But then there's another part that's just sort of, oh, this isn't going to ever happen. And that sort of comes from the time it's taken, you know, over the last six or so years and all the setbacks. And then the more of those setbacks sort of happen, there's that sort of undefinable bit that I find especially frustrating. That's just like, well, it hasn't happened. Maybe, you know, that leap is just beyond you, that next big leap. Yeah. I mean, how do you sort of navigate the bits that you, I don't know how to sort of communicate that more than that.
You know, you did it really well. So essentially it's basically, we never rise to the level of our potential. We sink to the level of our identity. And your identity, your core identity, your self-image, all of this kind of stuff, your self-concept, that's unconscious as well. So what happens is we can hit an invisible glass ceiling. So if you think like in our unconscious mind, you've got a metaphorical blueprint of life. And on this blueprint of life is written everything you're capable of achieving in life, all of your beliefs, your values, your worldviews, all of this kind of stuff. Now, this blueprint wasn't written by you. It was written by people who you were around primarily before the age of 7, a lot of this stuff. And what we do is that because we're very suggestible before the age of 7, our brain's very hypnotizable, essentially, because we have to take in so much, huge amounts of information and learn so much in those first years, from walking and talking to communicating, all of this kind of stuff. Now, that blueprint, we take other people's beliefs on there and other people's values, and then we run anything up to our entire life off that blueprint. So if that blueprint says, for example, you're capable of being X amount of successful, as soon as you start going above that level, it's like a thermostat in a room, it'll bring you back down to that level, which is what Conor was saying about cognitive dissonance. It doesn't like to be wrong. So anything that doesn't match the blueprint, it's called self-sabotage. Yeah. You're self-sabotaging you back to the level of the blueprint, the level of that identity.
Yeah.
So where people get it wrong is they have a thing which is like have, do, be. When I have this thing in my life, I'll do these things because I'll be happy. When I have £1 million in the bank, I'll be nice to my partner because I'll be happy, I'll be relaxed, I'll be calm. The problem is no one ever gets to the have thing, because you have to flip it and be, do, have. You have to be the kind of person who does the kind of things that as a natural byproduct will get $1 million in the bank or get that film off the ground. So essentially what we have to do is we have to go, what is my ambition, my dream, my vision? What do I want to hit? What target do I want to hit? And then you have to ask yourself, what does that thing that I want of me? Who has to show up in order to make that a reality? Yeah, that's your future self again. Now, the trick then is to become that person today. Walk like that person walks, talk like that person walks, surround yourself environmentally with the things that person would have. Because then when you feel that you are that person, when you embody that persona, you'll automatically do the behaviors that will naturally lead to being the thing. So if we find that we're sabotaging the same thing, we kind of get to a certain level and drop down, which I had a lot in it felt like a roller coaster. You kind of, if you're getting up and then it collapses, you're getting up and then it crashes, you're getting up and it falls down again. That's because my brain was kept pulling me back down to that blueprint level, that identity level. So what I had to do, and what I encourage people to do and will show people how to do, is how to raise the level of their identity to be above the level of their ambition, essentially. Then that becomes a natural byproduct, fueled by serotonin and flow.
Yeah. I mean, that sort of feels like that you've sort of hit the nail on the head there. It's this sort of level, it's like the conscious level is like, yes, I can definitely do this. And then there's just this thing that's behind that's like, no, you're at the level. I mean, I like it's interesting. I mean, I've touched on a few things like, Joe Dispenza and sort of, walking the walk. That sort of reminded me of certain bits like that. I mean, I suppose like just as a last sort of main question from me, and then I'll let sort of you and Conor discuss about your journey. But just I suppose my challenge, and I think a lot of people's challenge is, I mean, things are all right at the moment, but cast back to you haven't got any money, you're full of stress. I mean, how do you sort of break out of that pattern? Because I mean, it'd be great for everyone to join your coaching. I mean, I'm very interested in sort of the idea, but say you're in a state where everything's gone horribly wrong and you're in a fear, panic, low money sort of situation. It's hard in those sort of mindsets to put yourself in okay, I'm going to be calm. I'm going to think about my future self, because all you're doing is, projecting more fear.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So there's one thing that I get everyone in the group to learn first straight off the bat, which is a thing called cardiac coherence, which is essentially like CPR for your creative brain, essentially. And it helps you to synchronize your head and your heart brain. So basically, we've got two brains. We've got three brains in the body, the nervous system. And this is a fact. It's a field of science called neurocardiology.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, so when they're out of sync, that causes a very non-resourceful state. So state control is one of the things you want to get into, is how can I control my state so that in a more resourceful state, if you're in a non-resourceful state, you'll start making bad decisions, making bad choices and thinking negative things. If you're in a resourceful state, you start making better choices, better decisions and doing better things. So that's the things. One is state control. But another one is a really, really simple reframe, which is what I had to do for myself in the pandemic. So when that happened, it was obviously, I mean, I used to, I still do now, but I used to fly around, because I live abroad, but I used to fly backwards and forwards all around kind of Europe multiple times a week, backwards and forwards, to run trainings for people like Toyota and Porsche and Bentley and Westfield and all these kind of stuff, training the teams up and the senior management and the leadership teams and stuff. And what happened with COVID is suddenly it all went lockdown, so flights were grounded, you couldn't even leave your house. And overnight, literally my entire year's worth of work and money was essentially wiped out. It's just like, fun, gone. It's kind of like, shit, this is a problem. And initially said 10 days till we flatten the curve and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't believe that for a start. And I was thinking, okay, why the fuck is this happening to me right now? I mean, this is the last thing I need. And I kind of felt myself start going down the spiral. But then I stopped and asked myself the question that changed everything. Why is this happening for me? It wasn't why is this happening to me anymore, because then I'm at the effect of life. Now when I say why is it happening for me, now I'm at the cause of life. When I'm at the cause of shit, I can actually start changing the stuff. And what happened then was that's when actually Pressure Proof created the PPC groups. That's when it started, because I'd wanted to start a virtual group for a long, long time, but I hadn't done it because I was too busy flying around and traveling. And then I was suddenly locked down. It's kind of like, well, there's going to be a lot of people who are in my position who are shitting themselves right now. Why don't I just put an email out saying, hey, I'm going to do this thing. Do you want to join? I'll get you through. I'll coach you. We'll get through this shit together. So why is it happening for me? And really think on it and really sit down and think on it. And I really thought deep about it. I went for a walk around my terrace, as you do. Got a loop. And I thought, yeah, man, I'm going to start the group. And it's been going ever since then. So do think about that question. Why is this happening for me? And remember this about your unconscious mind. It's designed to answer questions. So if you ask low quality questions or negative questions, it will give you an answer. So if you say, why am I shit, or why am I not doing well, or whatever, it will come up with all the answers. And it will make shit up as well, because it will want you to feel that there's no cognitive dissonance to go, well, the person feels useless. So, well, because you stink, because you're small, because you weren't great then. So ask yourself a better quality question to get a better quality response. Why is this happening for me, for example?
That sounds like the subconscious mind is a little bit like ChatGPT. When it doesn't know the answer, it'll just give you some bullshit.
Hallucinates. It does. It'll dig it up. It'll dig it out. And it's got a lot of data to come from.
Conor, can you talk a little bit about some of the differences in decisions, mindset, and how you're approaching things from when you started working with Matt and now?
Yeah, I mean, the program I'm on is once a week. So just having that accountability every week. Sometimes I can't make it, obviously schedules, you know how it is in this industry, but I try my best to attend every week, and it's just always a refresh. And something that Matt talks about a lot is reframing. You know, it's how we look at things. Sometimes it's just, the thing isn't good or bad. It's the way we're looking at it. You know, we're interpreting all this meaning behind it. And Matt will sometimes really help me to just look at that thing in a different way. Maybe it's not a problem, it's a challenge. Maybe it's something that's going to help you to grow. Maybe I'm talking about my work outside of directing films and thinking, you know, maybe a little bit fed up with it. And Matt will help me to remind me that maybe that's there to serve the bigger purpose, the bigger goal. So a lot of the negative subconscious bullshit that hits us all the time, Matt does help you from my experience in a very practical way. It's not just like woo-woo, like think positive and your life's going to be amazing. It's very practical advice and applicable to those of us in the creative industry. Something I found, you know, really helpful that Matt mentioned, and Matt, you could talk more on this, was finding your onlyness. And that just hit me. It resonated. And Matt, maybe you can talk a little bit on that.
Yes, your onlyness is the fact that a lot of people in the creative industries, when they're kind of like doing their thing, doing their own thing, they're kind of finding what niche do I fit into and what should I be doing? And one of the big things to remember is this, which is you are the niche. That's enough. That is your blue ocean that will get you out of the red ocean. It's kind of leaning into what you truly, truly are, what you truly believe in. And being your onlyness and finding out what your onlyness is essentially knowing what are your deep obsessions? What are you massively obsessed with? What can you talk about for hours without tiring? That's one of the things. You want to list those things down, the things that you're really, really madly, passionately, deeply in love with to an obsessive level. The next thing you want to list down is like, what are you really, really amazing at? What's your genius zone? Where does that sit? So what do you do that's absolutely just better than most people, that's easy as falling off a log? So you want to write those kind of things down. Then you want to do something that's really counterintuitive, which is write down the traumas you've been through in your life and the lessons you've learned from those things, the growth that's come from those things. Because a lot of the times people will find their thing, their purpose, their onlyness in the thing that nearly destroyed them, that nearly broke them or did break them. And there's a lot of people who will find their purpose after they've lost something very big in their life, and suddenly they're driven. And they're not just motivated to make change, they're inspired to make change. So you want to think about that. And finally, is to blend it all together so you can actually create a business around it and a life that can sustain that. It's like, what is the market crying out for? What does the world of tomorrow need? And who are your starving crowd is the big thing. Who is starving for the thing that you have? That's a combination of what your obsessions are, what your traumas are, what your genius is, and who is most hungry for that. And getting really clear on that. And then knowing that you're the niche and be that person, do that thing, show up as that.
I think that's one of the most frustrating bits I find personally, is that because, I mean, there's certain, I feel like I'm, you know, I understand people and psychology, you know, not in a sort of a psychologist sense, but like in a film and storytelling sort of sense. And I feel like a lot of my stories are fairly traumatic or fairly heavy sort of dramas. But that is something I feel like I have a really good, you know, and the humor side as well. But I feel like those are, you know, two areas I have like a really good grasp on. And I find it very frustrating when, you know, you're sort of pushed into something that's inverted commas commercial, or it's this genre or that genre because it's easy to sell. And I have like no personal stake in or interest in sort of doing that. And I find like that's something that sort of the industry tends to do in general is maybe really push people to the third point, which is like, you know, what do people want, or what are they, you know, looking for or hungry for? But people use that as the sort of the guiding principle rather than, okay, this is what I'm good at. This is what I care about enough to actually get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a few things with it. It's like there's a difference between motivation and inspiration. So if you're doing something that goes against your values, you need to be constantly motivated to do it. And that's exhausting because it requires like willpower. But if you do something that's in alignment with your values, now you're inspired to do it. It becomes effortless to you. So another thing, and this links back to what we were saying about at the beginning about burnout, is that we used to think that burnout was a result of too much work, which is not true. And people still believe that. Burnout's a result of too little work that's meaningful.
Wow. That's fascinating. Yeah. I mean,
that is something that really hits. It really hits.
Yeah. I mean, if you consider as well, because there's maybe it's a more of an old school sort of like viewpoint, but I think some of the older generations, they sort of look at it as well. Creative industry, it's fun, working, earning money, that's the important thing. And there's no sort of correlation in understanding why people are exhausted when they're not doing, people that are creatively minded. I mean, I think a lot of people are sort of in the ADHD or autism spectrum in some regard that are in the creative industry. And I think it's very hard for a lot of people to actually go and do those jobs. And it is exhausting and it's depressing, and it's not something that people can comprehend, I think, unless they're in that industry or that way, like wired.
Yeah, I think you really do need to know and keep remembering why you're doing what you're doing. It's really important because you can get lost within it and who you need to be in order to be that, and make sure you don't get lost in the process. But it is really, really, really keep amplifying. I call it magnifying the mission. So you want to keep magnifying the mission, and the mission is, why am I doing this? That's the really, really key thing. Because if you lose sight of that, then it starts becoming exhausting. Then you might fall out of love with it. If you fall out of love with it, then therefore it's no longer meaningful to you. If it's no longer meaningful to you, then it becomes more exhausting. Then you get more cortisol. Then it becomes more difficult because your brain's now shrinking. So it's like this kind of vicious kind of loop. So you want to pull yourself out of it by knowing, why do I do what I do? Why is this the best thing in the world for me to be doing?
And you can do that with the inverse as well, right? You can do the small positive steps. If you say you're going to do something, we talk about this like accountability. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And maybe it does start off small. It's just like, I'm going to do that, whatever it is, post on social media. I'm going to write those amount of pages per day. It doesn't have to be this immense goal initially. And start building up your sense of, I suppose, your sense of self, your self-identity, Matt, that starts to reinforce the positive as opposed to the negative side.
Yeah, so that's what the 100 dirty reps we talk about, which is basically, so you decide, you go...
It's nothing saucy, don't worry.
It's not dodgy, yeah, it's very, very not dodgy. I guess you could choose with dodgy, but we tend not to. But so 100 dirty reps is essentially, you decide what it is you want, and then you decide who needs to show up in order to have that thing. And then you go, what behavior will that person have on a daily basis that means that thing that I want is going to be automatic? And then you pick that one thing and you do it for 100 days straight, no excuses. And what the trick is to do something, make it so small you can't possibly fail to start with. And then once you've done that for 100 days, you've drilled that in, that becomes a part of your identity. You're kind of reinforcing that you are the person you say you are. Then you pick the next 100 days. What's the next thing you want to kind of like hardwire into your identity, essentially?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I think there's lots of things like not drinking coffee would be a great one for me. I mean, just that sounds like definitely something I'd love to implement and try, and because when I pick something like that and I commit to it, I definitely see it through. It's just actually having a reason to do that, but.
It's the initial jumping off point, isn't it, Dom? That gets you quite often.
Yeah.
It's like, that is the hardest part. It's just starting the damn thing.
Yeah, like cold showers. Like when I did it for like 3 years, and then I stopped for various reasons, and now I haven't got back into it. And it's like, that's, but I would religiously do it without sort of fail. I mean, just one bit that you mentioned about behavior, because you just mentioned about like behaving in a way that would be at a certain level. So, I mean, just to give you an example, say if you're wanting to attract, say if you're an actor or a director or whatever, and you want to attract like a big producer to work with you in the future, but you don't know exactly what it is to convince that kind of person to work with you. I mean, like, I suppose that's the issue, because I mean, some people, they just sort of seem to attract, these big production companies, and they get all the meetings, and maybe it's because of the kind of work they're doing, or maybe it's their sort of persona. But it's for most people, it's very hard to find that kind of decision maker that's going to like take a punt on them or take a risk as an outsider. And I think it's very difficult finding that balance between being passionate enough to make an impression versus, overwhelming as a stranger. Like, I mean, do you have any sort of tips in that general field?
What about not coming across as a bit of a stalker kind of thing?
Well, yeah. I guess basically showing your worth without being overwhelming to someone at a much higher level that you're trying to show that, I should be working with you. that kind of thing.
It's an interesting one because I think it's our it's probably our insecure self. He thinks what we're doing is stalkery and quite nerve wracking for the other person. Because I remember when I was like running agencies and stuff, advertising agencies, and I was kind of the person people would want to speak to get a job.
Yeah.
I loved it. If someone had that kind of relentless passion, it's that relentless passion and a relentless desire to be seen and heard that you can't teach someone. You can teach someone a lot of the skills, but that passion, that drive that someone has, it's very difficult to teach that. So I think a lot of the time it's probably that part of us that's insecure that thinks, I don't want to keep doing this because it's annoying, or is that part of us that remembers being a kid that your parents would say, you need to stop asking so much, you're being really annoying now, it's kind of like back off. So I think find out what it is you want and go for it. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, if you want to get a yes in this world, you have to walk through the land of no. And there's lots of no's. And rather than going out in the world and trying to go, I want to get a big yes off the person I want to work with, every day wake up and see how many no's you can collect. That's the game. That's what you're playing. You go, wow, I got 15 no's today. That's awesome. Because if you're getting 15 no's, it means you're taking action. So you're taking massive, consistent, decisive action.
Yeah.
And it's and success is literally a game of inputs and outputs. You can't control the output. Like the Stoic philosopher says, nothing frustrates humans more than the fact that they control everything and yet they control nothing. So we can't control the outcome, but what we can control the inputs that we put into it. So take control of the inputs and chase no's.
That inputs and outputs, again, such a simple way of explaining it, but another one that just really shifted things for me that I've really started to implement recently. You know, sometimes someone will come along and they'll just change your whole understanding of how something should be done. I've heard Alex Hormozy talk about this, and he was like, someone said, you know, are you doing flyering? He's like, yeah, you know, I gave out like 500 flyers. He's like, come and see me when you've done 50,000. I do like 3 posts a week. Come and see me. I'm doing like 500 a month or whatever it is. And I think the same can be applied to filmmaking. Not that you want to just be spamming everyone, you know, relentlessly if you've not got anything really to share. But I think it is a game of input versus output. And sometimes you're looking, what have I actually done this week that's going to move the needle forward? And sometimes it's not as much as you think. Or you're going to compare that to someone else and go, oh, wow, they really are taking those swings. They've got 100 no's this week. I've got like 2 and I feel a bit disheartened by it. Do you know? So that for me is always interesting. And also, Matt, you spoke about paying the vision tax.
Yeah.
It's, you know, this stuff's not easy. And that's just the long and short of it, right? It's not like you just sort your mentality out and then everything. You've got to put the work in. And it's such a competitive industry. Anything in the creative industry is super saturated. There's so many people, few jobs, not much money, especially everything we've been through recently. So yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about paying the vision tax and what that entails.
Yeah. So when you think about what it is you want to achieve, so your vision, your ambition, your dream, your mission, etc., you get clear about what it is. So you know what it is, not what it isn't. You want to get as clear. It's almost as if you could describe it in so much detail. It's already happened. That's how clear you need to be about a thing you wish to have. And then you have to ask that thing that I said before about what does that thing that I want of me? And that is the tax. That's the vision tax. That's what you're going to have to pay in order to get this thing. You've got to, I call it goal offsetting. You've got to offset something in order to get the new thing in your life. You know what I mean? Energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed. So what you're going to let go of, and that might be an identity. That might be a part of you. That might be a belief. What you're going to let go of in order to gain that new thing. And that's the tax you're willing to pay. And you kind of say to yourself, am I willing to pay the tax? So tot up all the tax. Okay, it's going to cost me all these things. Am I willing to pay it, yes or no? If it's a no, that's cool. Then maybe the vision isn't right, or you need to shift the vision. But if you are willing to pay the tax, there's a good chance, if you get enough inputs, that you will reach it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's one, sometimes there's let's just take coffee, for instance. Like, I would love to not be drinking like loads of coffee every day. But even though I'm aware it's not actually that helpful creatively after a point, I find it very difficult to like that one, especially like to get past the, you know, the repetition and the habits. And, you know, I've tried many times over the years. I've sort of got into like drink tea every other day. I've sort of had these things and nothing's really stuck Do you get people that are stuck in these like horrible cycles where it doesn't feel like anything can motivate them to actually do the behavior?
Yeah, 100%. Well, so the behaviors you're talking about, like the drinking, the excessive coffee that you'd rather not do, that rather than treating that's the symptom.
Yeah.
It's a symptom of something else. And it's something unconscious that's driving the behavior to want to drink the coffee. And there's a part of you that feels the safest thing you can do is to drink the coffee or smoke the cigarette or drink the alcohol. And that's the thing, is that this part doesn't know, because it's unconscious and it's kind of locked off in a little black box. It doesn't know that what it's doing is hurting or harming you anymore. So what we have to do, there's many ways I do it, which is either conversational or formally through some hypnosis or conversationally, is to go beneath the level of logic and language. So you kind of essentially fly under the radar of consciousness to get into the unconscious mind and change it there. It's the blueprint. So on that blueprint is written, coffee equals safety. So we have to change the blueprint to change your life, essentially. And it's because it's a conscious level symptom. That's not the thing that needs fixing. It's what's driving it beneath that. And then we take that out.
Fascinating. Is there anything you'd both like to anything we haven't covered yet before we sort of wrap up things?
The group that Conor's talking about, and it's been going for a long while now, is called Pressure Proof Creative. And if you go to pressureproofcreative.com, it explains what it's all about. It kind of talks about what it's all about. What I've done as well is given a special deal for people who are listening to the podcast, which is if you want to join, so it's $97 a month normally, so it's about 24 quid a week, essentially. So it's not a lot of money. And if you join via a link, if you go to leadingleft.com/passcode, people can get like a full month for $1, essentially. So what's that? 25 cents for a week. And it's every Friday, 11:30 UK time for about an hour and a half. And we get stuck in, we get deep, and we kind of make shit happen, essentially. We move things and we make magic happen in a non-cheesy way. So leadingleft.com/passcode for $1.
Wow. Amazing. Sounds good. Sounds very good. Well, thanks, Matt. It's been a real pleasure having you on the podcast. And
this has been a pleasure being on it. Thank you.
Really useful stuff. And need to get off our asses and start changing
start
our
paying
lives.
That vision tax. Pay the vision tax.
Pay the vision tax. Absolutely. Who are you going to be? Be that person today.
Amazing.
Matt, thank you, mate.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure, and thank you, Conor. Thanks very much, and thank you, Dom. Really appreciate that, and I enjoyed it a lot.
It's been great.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.